All right, next up we're going to be looking at the new nations. What we're going to look at is United States, Eastern Europe, United States, and Japan. So what's going on with the new nations of Eastern Europe? Well, they're going to be a little more difficult to deal with even than some of the nations in Western Europe. It's tough to fix their situation because they're very rural based. They don't have industrialization to try to revamp their economies post-World War I. So this leads to a fixation on nationalistic issues. In other words, they're concerned about preserving their culture and expanding their nations and expanding their borders, and they're not real concerned about domestic issues. And what this leads to is it leads a lot of social unrest within their borders. And that's why you get something that we get in number 3. They tried parliamentary structure, but they almost always end up with monarchs or dictators. But just to rehash it, Eastern Europe, post-World War I, agricultural, very concerned about nationalistic issues, and they tried a parliamentary structure. Now, just to give you an example of this, how it's what I'm talking about, let's look here for just a second at this map on Eastern Europe. Now we've got here, if you look here, this is going to show how the maps changed for Eastern Europe. This is going into World War I. Look how big Germany is, Russia, Austria-Hungary, then you've got Serbia down here and Bulgaria, and you've got a few places. But look at this map. Now this is the map going into World War I. Okay, and this is the map, right, these are the 3 alliances, the Triple Alliance, actually, yeah, the Triple Alliance is here in green, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, Triple Entente. Okay, but what happens post-war, 1917 through 1925? Again, look at this board, look at these borders, watch what happens here. That's Eastern Europe after World War I. By 1925, we have the new nation of Poland. Look how much smaller Germany got. You've got Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia down here, all right, and a little bit of Germany there. Look at that. Let me replay that again. Watch again. Watch what it is at the beginning and see how much it changes. That's our new map of Eastern Europe. So each of these places is, for the most part, agricultural and very, very concerned about trying to expand their borders, but not taking care of their domestic issues. Okay? So what about the United States? What helped to contribute to the economic boom of the United States in the mid-1920s? First off, government-supported business, often at the expense of labor. In other words, workers don't see their conditions increase that much, but the businessmen are getting wealthier. High tariffs and low taxes. You guys remember what tariffs are, right? Think about it a second. Oh, no, you were wrong. No, tariffs are, I'm kidding. Tariffs are taxes on goods coming into your country. So the American government, the U.S. government, put taxes on goods coming in and taxed domestic companies at a low rate. So it gave them a competitive advantage. Small companies were combined to create big conglomerates. It was a return to monopoly. We had, and you'll learn about this next year, we've been through a monopoly phase in the 1890s, and we'll return to that. We'll also see a huge consumer culture growing in the United States, particularly with installment buying. As people start to buy on installment and buy on credit, you'll see a big increase there in businesses. Now, one of the interesting things is, how can the United States seem to be both isolationist and interventionist at the same time? Well, what we end up with is we end up as interventionist in the Americas, and we're going to learn about that more when we look at Latin America during World War I on. You're going to learn about that, and we're very, very heavily involved in Latin America, Monroe Doctrine and all that. And also we have our burden of taking care of the small places. But we're isolationists when it comes to dealing with Europe. We don't want to get sucked in to another war. One of the things that happens is, remember the propaganda popular during World War I? Remember us talking about that. And propaganda during World War I exaggerated the atrocities of the enemy. And And by doing so, by exaggerating the atrocities of the enemy, when citizens found out later on that this was all a bunch of lies, they were angry. And they wanted to stay out. And they didn't trust on those kind of issues. What about Japan? What's going on in Japan? What were the positives and negatives of the interwar period for Japan? That's what we're looking at. First off, life's getting better for Japan. There's an increase in rice production. Yay! Means greater population. We know that. More food means more people, right? We've said that time and time again. There's also a growth in consumer culture, a growth in industrialization, and a growth, and I'm not sure how to say this word, but these places, and what these are companies that are involved in many, many aspects of life and business. It's not just, they don't just make cars, but they may make cars and refrigerators and appliances and bicycles, and they're involved in so much. Sometimes even in housing and workers' housing where workers live. And workers are getting more education. The Japanese were already in the 1800s one of the more educated places in the world, and now they're really emphasizing it. Okay, so what are the problems? Well, one of the problems is they're vulnerable to trade issues. They're a resource-poor nation. Remember, we've talked about that. In other words, they don't have a lot of the resources necessary to create a large industrialized nation. So that means they import a lot. And if people don't buy their products, then they're in trouble. They can't import the things they need. They're in trouble. There's also a tradition of oligarchies. Now, oligarchies had been samurai and shogun, and those guys in the medieval period of Japan. Then, in the late 1800s through the early 1900s, it's businessmen. And now, post-World War I, it's returning to military leaders. And these guys are not big fans of parliament and political parties. In fact, they'd really like to get rid of them. And you'll notice here, what's in green has become the Japanese, inside this line here, and what's colored in green have become the Japanese Empire leading up to World War II. Okay? All right, we'll look at Mexico next.